You can have whatever you like.
Oh, welcome to another episode of Nights at the Round Table. Dum, 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 dum. I wanna.
Here we go now.
Have you ever heard this before? This is Fred Hammond. If you guys are joining us, y'all.
I felt the spirit, you know?
Bruh, that's what I be vibing on. If y'all joining us, you know that this episode is called, or it's themed.
We don't know if it's called yet. Manny might change his mind.
There's no such thing as worship music. That's the working title. Here's what I mean. Now, it sounds sacrilegious, but it's not.
Manny loves a good clickbait moment.
Well, only because, look, being in the Christian industry for so long, I used to get so mad when people... Oh, and you know what? Shout out, before we start. Shout out to Terrell Owens. We're drinking his...
Shout out Terrell.
Terrell Owens. If you don't know, he's a football player.
Thanks, Terrell.
And he has this wine.
It's really good.
Oh, it's really good. I'm going to tag him.
This is the 81 Terrell Owens 2017 Cab Sav.
Yeah. I'm going to text my girl Haley, because Haley probably got me that. I don't know where.
Go sports.
Anyway, so being in the Christian industry, I used to get so upset because when people would term something worship music, it would always bother me because I'm like, wait, worship is a heart attitude or a position of your life towards God. Like everything you do, biblically speaking, is in worship to God. But I got so angry when we coined it an actual genre because unknowingly we caused this divide between every other genre of music and made it seem like this is the only acceptable way that we can worship God, as opposed to I'm gonna worship God with Lecrae, or I'm gonna worship God with whoever. You know what I'm saying? It has to be this one way. And it always made me feel like, yeah, it always made me feel like, man, what are we doing? Like, this is another segregation that doesn't really need to happen within the church. And I've always wanted to talk about it because I'm like, I was guilty of it. And I was talking about Beast earlier, like the only time they let us rap on Sunday mornings, look, this is how it breaks down. This is how it breaks down when it comes to Christian music.
When he says they let us rap, he doesn't mean me, by the way, unfortunately.
Christian music, Sunday mornings are the sacred in church America, right?
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to get on that stage on Sunday morning is if you are somebody and that's it. So Sunday morning was always reserved for worship leaders, worship music, or music that comes close to worship. And then rappers like me, we're for the youth group. And it was very
Friday night.
It was very blatant. Like
young adults, Sunday night.
Young adults, we were only for the kids.
Raw and unfiltered.
It was so whack. And then the one time we got to rap at church, they made us wear pink choir robes.
Pink?
Pink with doves on them. I'll never forget it.
I'd love to see a photo of this. Please tell me you have one.
We had to be in choir robes in order to stand up there. And we weren't allowed to like...
Did the rest of the people on stage have to be on choir robes?
Just the choir?
Right, that makes sense.
They literally dressed us up as that, as someone, as
just
if
in
to
case
say,
there was
like,
any confusion.
I don't know what it was. Like,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
to
why.
make it softer, like a softer blow,
A little
like
more
hey,
palatable.
Yeah, like accept
Don't worry,
them.
he's holy. He has
They
doves.
look like us. So I'm trying to figure out like what out like this type of thing. Like, I don't know. It bothers me. It really does bother me. Because what are we saying?
Yep. Listen, I grew up. I knew all the lyrics to Hillsong Worship. Like,
Yeah, you did.
I knew all of them. Like, test me. I might not know anymore. But like, I couldn't tell you like Justin Timberlake's lyrics for a good while. And so like, I was that kid, but like, I felt like how like Christian I was how well I knew all the lyrics. Like even the ad-lib moments, even the runs, even the like sing it Katrina on the recording, which is actually a recording. If you know Hillsong, you know. Then like I knew them all. And to me, I was like, yeah, because I'm a Jesus follower, like as if my memory had anything to do with my spirituality. And I think that, so when I was growing up, like I listened to Britney Spears one more time, and like sometimes I run, sometimes I cry, sometimes I, scared of you, but I choreographed them. It's fine, whatever. And Aaron Carter, but I never listened to like it was always coming back to like the Christian gospel artists of the world. And I think that for me growing up, it was a very strange thing as I started to like have moments with God, if you will, to like Coldplay. Or I still remember being at like a Youth Alive event, which was an Australian thing, which I didn't know till the other day that you guys came and performed at an EXO day. which in Australia was like this big evangelical day where all of our Australian churches got together and we were like, look at us. And we had like,
I mean, I'm pretty sure because it was in a like a big arena, like it was in an arena, like it was really big.
Like they always brought people from America. Apparently Australia we only had Hillsong.
Because
we had Hillsong, but we only had Hillsong, you know?
That was like the first time I went and I was so amazed at how big it was. And it was like televised. So I'm assuming that's what the day you're talking about.
I'm gonna pretend it was. But anyway, look at God. But I remember them doing a special, or like an item, we called it. They sang like Fix You by Coldplay, and it was raining. It was an outdoor arena. And I remember I was like, this is super spiritual. And we were always on the lookout for Christian songs that we could like do a special with. Like when Shackles came out, I thought the Lord was about to return. Like I was like, Jesus coming back.
Like this
He
is
said
the
four corners, like Mary, Mary, y'all have actually ushered in the second coming. Like, well done.
Yeah.
Like for me, I always grew up on it, but I didn't grow up with this like Christian American, I think, view of like, if you didn't listen to Christian music, you were a sinner. But I just didn't listen to stuff with like cuss words in it. I wasn't allowed. So I think growing up, I was very inundated with worship music, but I didn't have that religious extreme of like, I couldn't. But when I moved to America, that's when I figured out, oh, people did, like lots of them. And so
because this is bigger than worship music. I mean, it's the conversation is starting with worship, but it's really about like,
what is worship?
What have we made one-dimensional that is really 4D?
Yeah,
like within Christianity, because they made this genre and they turned this music so one-dimensional to where, like, I remember reading comments on Mercy Me's
I can only
iTunes
imagine.
page, right? And I remember seeing people say, "Oh my God, they're using guitars again in their song. This isn't God."
Yeah.
Well, that speaks to a bigger thing of like,
because they're using, because there is an idea of what worship is.
Yeah.
And so what else has been made one dimensional that we're realizing now is like 4D? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Deeper than that.
In so many ways, you know, worship is one of the very few ways that Christians feel like they can connect and begin to understand who God is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they put him in this box with their limitations based off, you know, their background, their current experience, life experience. And they're like, this is the only way that I feel safe and secure as far as in my relation to who God is in my life. And this is what I need. And it was interesting because I had, similarly to ELYSE growing up, I only listened to Christian music. And I just remember moments where I felt like, if I'm being honest with myself, I was like, this Christian music feels whack.
Mm-hmm.
But you had to love it.
Like I had to listen to it. I had to like thoroughly love it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh,
thoroughly love it.
This is just like, this feels so boring. I feel uninspired.
Cheesy.
If anything, I feel drier than I was when I came into this song, whatever that means. I feel just like, it feels like a plane that's trying to get off the ground, but it's still on the runway.
And everyone's pretending it's flying.
And everyone's like, oh my God, look how high that plane is.
What a great pilot.
And look, to all respect, like maybe for them it really is.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's their Jones.
But it's, to me, like no Christianity looks the same in each other's life.
Right.
Like the way that Christ is manifested in my life can look vastly different from someone else. So when it comes down to it, like worship music, and again, I'm going to get back to another point, but at the end of the day, it's what is it that puts your gaze, your posture of your heart, and positions you in a place where you are now aware of this thing that's happening around you called God.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a ton of things that could do that to get you to that place where you become aware. So for me, I just remember one of the there's two game-changing moments that happened for me in 6th grade. And one of them was hearing Grindin'. It was by this group called Clips with Pusha T and Malice, and it was produced by this icon at this point, Pharrell.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing this beat, and I remember my little 6th grade brain exploding because I had never heard somebody assemble a beat in that way with the drums and the 808s kicking in, and I just thought, holy shit. I didn't even know this was possible to do on a track.
Mm-hmm.
And having your mind blown like that it can do nothing but inspire creativity inside of you. And again, if we truly believe what the scriptures say, that the devil can only steal, kill, and destroy, as quoted in John 10, he can't create anything. He can only distort. He can only become a thief of something else. So if we're hearing new things, we know that that creation can't come from him.
Right.
He can't usher in anything new, right? He can only steal. So when I'm hearing new things and I'm hearing these artists create things, you're like, God, the only person that I know who is responsible to actually create is the Spirit of God. And it's not to say that that track is holy or anything. I'm not even arguing that. What I'm arguing is that even Satan himself couldn't make that.
Right.
That's something completely new that we never heard of. And so I remember there's a few moments like that where I'm hearing these songs and I'm realizing what's happening inside of me and how all of a sudden I'm thinking, God, new things are possible. Holy moly. The first time I heard Usher on Yeah. Dude, that song is still, that's a huge moment.
That was a big moment.
And Christians were hating on it, right? They were like, all these things, like Usher put witchcraft voodoo on that track or whatever. But I remember hearing that and thinking, oh my gosh, a whole new future can happen.
Dude, for me, you know what song it was for me? And it rocked me on all my drives back and forth from Bible college. And it ministered to me more than any other song.
I think I know what you can say.
What?
DMX?
DMX was in my worship time at college.
Okay.
This was in the car, specifically for the car, and I don't know why it was this
Frank
song.
Sinatra?
No, it was Lose Yourself.
Yes. Oh,
Eminem?
gosh.
Eminem.
That was my second guess.
So when I was driving
That
back
was on
and
my
forth,
yoga playlist.
I can't tell you how many
That was the abs
times
track.
I was bawling my eyes out.
Wow.
Because at this point, I'm still a dreamer. I'm in Bible college. I fully believe that I'm going to be a musician someday. I have no idea how it's going to happen. And it was literally my one shot. Like, this was it. And I didn't know if I was wasting it in college because I was like, I'm only here to learn about Jesus. But, like, what do I do with my music career? Because that's what I really want to do. Started this band in college. But I already saw it that it was going to break up because, you know, Liz wanted to go get married and Paul was going to go do his thing. And so I was like, man, this ain't going to last. So it was just very much an unsure future. And anytime I listen to that song, bruh, like, it took me to church. And I don't know if any, like, I wonder if believers would think that that's a legitimate Holy Spirit experience. Because I do think what you said is so accurate when you said different things force you to gaze on God differently. And if whatever that thing is forces your gaze on God, then why isn't it holy? At least for that moment.
Yeah.
Or why isn't that experience holy? Like, people laugh when they sit here, I worship to DMX. It's like, but it took me there. Like, it took me to the throne room.
I think anyone saying that only worship music is in the, like, Christian music scene, like that music genre can connect you with God, like only worship music in the worship music genre can connect you with God, doesn't know God. Because you're literally saying that God cannot use anything, that he isn't all powerful enough to be able to take something, even something that the enemy meant for evil, like for good.
Or that he would actually favor a certain genre.
It's like,
imagine if America believed that hip hop was it. Because if we wanted to, we can sell the world on hip-hop.
Because they can do hip-hop music in the Christian scene. Like, but then they're like, is it worship music? Is it not? People like,
no, but that's what I'm trying to say.
Explode.
What I'm trying to say is we were taught that this was it. The music that we're worshiping to now, 50 years ago, was considered demonic.
That's what I mean. I think this is just another version of religion where we've taken it to an extreme. In the same way that women used to like weren't allowed to wear makeup if they were actually holy, or like women had to wear dresses down to the floor. Some still do in some belief systems. But I think this is just another way that we, in our own human need to control things.
Yeah, it's a form of control.
Like, I would love to go to, and we've had this conversation that, you know, B was just telling us about our friend who leads worship at a church, and he does pop music at the beginning of service. Yeah. And I'm like, what would it look like if a church decided to start their services off with, like, bring on the rapper from the church? Bring him on. This is how we're starting song 1 and song 2.
Oh my gosh, bring on like Chance the Rapper also.
Because you know how, bro, if Chance the Rapper showed up at your church,
I'll be so that would connect me to God immediately.
Or John Bellion or even
Can you
Andy
listen,
or any
the
of them.
amount
And
of
they
times.
just, and for the, you know, for the, if any of you are church kids, for the first 2 songs that are fast worship songs, what if they were hip hop? Like if a church actually like, and there was a church that tried to usher that in.
I've been in churches that have done that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
In Tampa, there's dude Tommy, Urban Disciple. He had a hip hop church, like a full on hip hop
Love that.
church.
That's fire.
It was fire.
I love that.
I think that's sick.
Yeah. I think that's so necessary because the nominal Christian experience here in America is relegated to a Sunday morning experience with predictable, comfortable worship songs.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people feel so disoriented in this chaotic world that they need worship songs to remind them that they actually are safe and secure in this standing with God.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is, it's like, that's a good starting point. Like, that's okay. Like, you actually need some sort of structure and order in your life to begin this faith walk. But you don't stop there. Like, you have to evolve. Like, at this point in my life, I rarely listen to worship music to connect with God. And I am the most connected and fascinated by God that I have ever been in my life, which I think is key, right? I think those two go hand in hand. Like, when you're truly connected, you're also truly fascinated, which makes you more connected. And it's just this beautiful cycle between the two. And so to me, there's a lot of times, and again, I'm sorry for anyone who gets offended because of this, but there's a lot of times where I hear modern Christian music, and you could go down the list. You can name every single worship artist, and I hear their stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, this ain't it. This ain't it for me. This honestly feels uninspired. Sonically, it doesn't sound good. This just feels like this was just cashed in very quickly. And I'm like, why would I want to use my precious time to listen to something that just gets me frustrated? I would rather listen to something that makes me feel lifted, inspired, even if it's not by a Christian artist. Because at the end of the day, listen, I'm trying to connect with God. And I'm going to listen to things that musically walks me on this journey where my mind and my heart start feeling like they're going to a deeper place.
Right.
And so sometimes that's hip hop. Sometimes that's Drake. Sometimes that's old Kanye. Sometimes that's an old Travis Scott song where you're hearing his heartbreak spill onto this and you're thinking, man, in the ways, where is my heart unhealed? God, come and save. Like, you know, there's so many things. And I think for so many people, they actually need to feel like they're a part of this global church by singing the same songs that everyone else is singing.
I think that, I think you said something key there, which is it doesn't connect with me. And I think that's an important preface.
Yeah, for sure.
I know you know that, because they do connect with someone. But in the same way that I'm not judging someone for the country Christian that they love listening to, or the fact that they still are singing the same songs in their church from the 90s and will not change them. If that's what helps you connect with God, that's how you connect with God. And if that is true and your motivation is true and you truly are connecting with God, then have at it. But in the same way that we don't judge that, I think that we would do all of ourselves a service of unity, which God commands a blessing on, just FYI, not sameness, unity. Anyway, don't judge someone else by how they connect with God. And I think when it comes to worship, the things I read in scripture about what God did judge was the spirit behind worship, not what it looked like. And so I think that when we get into a dangerous territory, when we start to label things in our human selves that sound good because it's the kind of genre we like, because before it was worship music, there was also country and hip hop and R&B and pop and heavy metal and all that kind of stuff. There was, and rap. Before we put the Christian music label on it, it still had another genre label. Yeah. And so don't call worship music the type of genre you like listening to that changed a word for Jesus instead. And I think that one of the coolest things, whatever your take on him is or not, that's not what I'm here to argue. But I think when Justin Bieber did release that gospel, that freedom at Easter.
Yeah, it was trash.
I know you didn't like it. I know that you didn't like it. But for me, what I did like was that he was telling his story through his song. He was doing it in his way of his own testimony. Yeah. And I think that you have to look at that and you have to respect that someone's doing it in their way. And it may be cheesy to some people, but some people connected with God. Yeah. There were some songs that I was like, him and Tori Kelly's song, I was like, that made me think about like, where am I? Because for me, it's always about fitting in. So for me, that song spoke to me. Like God speaks to you through Travis Scott. I don't know none of his songs, which won't surprise anybody,
okay.
but like that's
okay.
I think that collectively, however we connect with God and puts our eyes off our own human experience and onto the God that created all of it, that is worship. And God was never concerned about the method. If anything, he judged someone that brought something to the temple that looked like worship but didn't have the spirit of worship behind
wasn't authentic.
it.
Yeah.
And it's always the spirit behind it. In the same way that we talk about cussing and the fact that it's not necessarily the words, it's the spirit behind it. There is the same spirit behind worship of humbly, like of coming to God and saying, God, I want to put worth off the world and worth on who you are and have this connection with you. And however that looks is however we get so caught up in these religious rituals and call it Christian. And I just wonder if some of the songs that we call worship and have earned someone a lot of money, and okay, I'll get off my soapbox in a sec. I'm sorry. But like it puts so much pressure on Christian artists. Some of them are fully milking it, and I get that, and the Lord will judge you. But like that's so much pressure for these
The amount of artists that
kids
I
that
had
liked playing an instrument.
Yeah, I had friends with who literally felt like they were no longer called to music, or music wasn't their calling
Because of
anymore.
the pressure.
Because they couldn't land a song on AC radio, because they couldn't get past the gatekeepers, because they couldn't. And again, because the industry became one dimensional. Like it had to sound like this. And look, we're not crapping on. Like there's worship music that I still listen to.
Like I still listen to worship music. I like a lot of worship music, but I
don't even like calling it worship music. Okay, the only reason I'm saying that is
pop.
because that's the only way you're gonna like. No other genre in the world is described by its belief system.
Yeah.
Like there's not Muslim rap, there's not Buddhist rap, there's not like we are the only ones who decided to slap a
atheist
faith
rap,
Mormon jazz
on. Like you'll never hear it. Think about that. Think about how silly it must look to the rest
Buddhist
of the world.
alternative.
Ooh,
One of the most annoying.
You would like that one.
Annoying questions that I always get is, I thought you were doing. Are you still doing Christian music? And I keep you like, there's no such thing.
Baby, it's all Christian.
There's no such thing as Christian music. There's only Christian people. Like it's like you're attributing a personification to something that cannot be personified. Like you're really, it sounds like an argument point. I'm sure that religious people are listening to this like, oh, you're just trying to get people to stop listening to Christian music, or you have something against, but it's more so like, think about what you have made one-dimensional in your life.
Yeah.
Unknowingly, because it's been taught as this ideal, but you never even stop to think, wait a minute, if I say that this is worship music, then what am I really telling my brother over here that doesn't do that genre? Who, if he could sing, I'm sure would do that, because that's really where the money's at. The richest ones are over here in the worship, because those are the ones that get the songs licensed, the ones that all the churches sing. There's a whole organization that literally keeps track of who's singing what song, so that these worship singers get paid for their money. And I'm talking about their catalogs are worth millions. Only genre like that.
Dang, I should have been a worship leader.
Only genre.
Great worship songs. Damn.
Which shows you something. It shows you that at some point the church prioritized this.
Yeah.
And by doing so, left everyone else out.
Well, I have a question on that, because was it the church that prioritized it? Was it just our world that put
no, it was the church, because
yeah.
every step of the way, the church decided what was demonic and what was Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was either they were always trying to create division to make things black and white, so they can know where they stand. You know?
Worship songs
we
were being
brought in
created
drums
by David, like they were called poems.
That I want to know what that sounded like. I wish
me too.
I knew with Psalms,
because
or the
if
song
you want to
of
look at Psalms with David, listen,
Dude,
Song of Songs was Beyonce's new record. That was
he
her
played.
songs.
I know they talk about harps. I know they talk about whatever.
But he's a sad boy. Like,
that's what I mean. He was so honest about it.
Like,
he
would have
been
venting. He was like, "Yo, low key, all these dudes around me don't deserve to be winning, and they're winning, God, and I'm mad as hell."
He would have been the Juice World of our of his generation.
He
really would.
He'd had emo music,
emo rap all day long.
Like Olivia Rodrigo.
One thing I want to push back on you. You said something, and you were
Always.
talking about how because I think it's so much bigger than what you were saying, and I think you'll actually agree with me with what I'm saying.
I love that.
Is you were talking about how music that gets us off of our human experience onto God but I think God is so much found in our human experience.
Yeah.
So I think that music that gets us into the human experience on a deeper level, honestly, I think it gives us pictures into the divine.
I was gonna, but I think maybe the reason I love worship so much is because when I'm having a day where I'm concentrated on just the wrong thing. I'm in my feels. Not in the good way. Like I'm in my anxiety. I'm pissed off at that person for something that does not even matter. Like someone didn't respond to my text and now I just feel rejected. Worship helps me connect back to the main thing, back to like, oh, this is bigger than right now.
It's so much because it's so much more explicit in the lyrics of like, God, I need you, instead of like, listen, Kiki broke my heart again. I don't know if I'll ever try again. Like something like, and
Love
you're
that
just
song.
like, yeah, that's a great song.
I mean,
that
I
Drake
always
ever released.
baby, ooh, baby. You know what I mean? So like
Drake always,
thing.
we call him Pastor Drake for a reason because he
Pastor
be
Aubrey.
dropping. There's a couple of songs that have brought me to the throne of God recently. One, Castle on a Hill by
Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran.
He's great.
I've been many times driving to that song and his recollection of his past and where he's gone from and how he can still see himself on those country lanes. Like I think about, man, the younger me and how the younger me will look at the me now and be like, bro, no way. Like, no way. I think about out of all the people to make it and get a record deal, like there was nothing like, it was just so wild how we ended up getting this record deal. And then I get to tour the world and I get to do all this, like I get to live my dream. Like it's just like, no way. And so that song took me back to that where I'm like reminiscing and I'm just bawling my eyes out, screaming, I'm on my way. Like just screaming.
I can see it, you in the car.
Just bawling. And that song and then Lonely, like Justin Bieber's Lonely.
Oh, so other people listen to Justin Bieber here.
I love
dude,
Justin Bieber.
I'm
I'm
a
trying to
huge
find him
Bieber
I'm trying to find a show to go to because that song, not that
No,
I'm
that
anywhere.
was like when he did that on SNL too. Did you see that?
Yeah.
See,
His
album was the
Purpose album-
follow
His
up.
Purpose album was a
Yes.
worship album.
Yes, it
Amazing.
Straight up.
But this
Around.
album was a follow up to the Worship. The Worship album came and I was like, oh no,
Yep.
gone. But then this one ministered to me like I thought the Worship album would. In his
both of them
songs.
ministered to me.
Like the song Monster that he did with
Shawn
Mendes, freaking
Oh my gosh, I knew a song that you were talking about. Can we
It-
take a moment?
it is amazing. Think about what they say. What if I trip? What if I
Yeah.
fall? Am I a monster?
Yeah.
Like that's every believer that has any type of position of power.
But here's my question. Is it just songs that make you think or is it songs that connect you to God? Are they the same thing? Because to me, there are plenty of songs that made me think. But another example, The Greatest Showman,
Oh
that
my God.
movie, to me, everything that
Every
sparks
song.
who
Yep.
God created me to be. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about. And I'm just trying to catch up. Standard. A little slower than everyone else. But like anything that, as a little girl, I was so creative. I was a dreamer. I was like meant to live in Los Angeles, but then I came to Los Angeles and I was like, man. I was meant to live in the Hollywood version of Los Angeles, the La La Land.
Yeah.
Because I used to watch movies as a little girl. Anything with music and
Yeah.
song and like, listen, Lizzie McGuire movie. No one else.
She's just
There's going to be some listener that's like, I get you, okay? Why not?
I love Lizzie McGuire.
Take a crazy chance, you know? But like songs like that when I was a kid and like The Greatest Showman, La La Land, like things that have these musical numbers that spark this creativity and that feel the same as when I'm preaching
Yeah.
in the four walls of a church. Like that's what I think is worship. So like, are they two different things? Because we're saying like some songs make me think and yeah, for sure I have those songs
Ooh,
too.
I just got a revelation
Okay, go.
for this.
Because I think people get my question now. Hopefully.
What if let me preface this. I remember wanting to do a song about suicide and they wouldn't let me do it. I remember wanting to do a song about masturbation and they wouldn't let me do it because these are two dark and controversial things.
Yeah.
In what way? Just like talk about them, bring them up?
No, do a full song about masturbation and
Bellion?
a full song about suicide.
Mhm.
I have the suicide song. I have it recorded somewhere.
Wow.
And they didn't want me to put on the record because it was too dark. And it made me think like, whoa. but we're all struggling with this. Like a lot of people are killing themselves, and a lot of dudes feel shame because they're doing this thing. And it really tripped me out at that point because I was like, so I can't talk about it, and I'm trying to reach people.
Then who is?
So what exactly? What if the reason these songs by secular artists are hitting us because they were the ones free enough to write about it?
Yeah.
That met us where we were at as a human. Because Christians, not some believers think that there should be a certain message in Christian music. But how many times do you listen to a worship song and you can't even like explain what this air of God they're describing? That's why I always tell Ange, I'm like, I'm really more a gospel music guy, not a CCM worship. Because when you start saying God is in this place, the sweet air, the rain, or all these like, you know,
You bring
I'm diving
the
in.
amount of worship songs that I would not bring a like non-believer to. Please
Like,
don't talk about tongues of fire.
Like, how do I humanly connect to that?
And here's the thing: there is a world that is understood, and that again that helps people connect. But we're blanketing songs as for the body when that's a song for the toe.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're like,
but my question is, when have you turned? Here's a perfect example: during a breakup.
To worship.
To worship.
I'm not a great example because I do listen to worship.
yeah, it's part,
Before you would listen to Rascal Flatts or a John Mayer or a
We can look at my Spotify and like, yeah,
she's
it's a lot
she's
of
got
worship.
a couple playlists for that.
Yeah.
It's
I think there's a
They're
couple
called Just Cry.
There's more songs that are secular that speak to where I'm at in that moment
Sure.
than
because
a worship.
yeah, like to me
Not
it's
all
like
worship songs, but
there's very few moments where I could look at and I'm looking at quote unquote worship music and I'm like, when's the last time that I felt impacted by the honesty of a song?
Or seen.
Or
Like
seen.
where I'm at.
Like what you were speaking to of like where it feels like it meets you exactly where you're at in the human experience. I don't find that with a lot of worship music. I do find that with some worship music.
Shout out to Cody Carnes. He was the last one to do it to me.
Shout out to
Cody Carnes. His last.
Don't take that one quote out of context.
My boy, Jason Upton.
Yeah, there you go.
I just listened to
like,
Benjamin Hastings. If y'all haven't heard it,
Yeah.
The Jesus I Know, that song,
Great
that was
song.
like the
Common Hymnal's great. United Pursuit. I mean, these are some of my
Jonathan
staples.
McReynolds, as we know.
Yeah, shout out to all of our favorites.
all our favorites. We love you so much.
Just in case you thought we were trying to shit on worship music, we're not.
Yeah, no, I still listen to
Still
it. but
Stacey
it's
Rico.
just
I
like-
love you so much.
But it's to me, I'm like, I guess because that's one of the things that I value most is like, it's truly trying to live with the most amount of honesty that I can. Like I'm constantly trying to tell the truth about myself, and to other people. So constantly the music that I'm listening to reflects that value.
I want Christian music to get dirtier.
I do. I want
If
it
it
to
got
be so much
dirtier,
more unfiltered.
Like if I know these artists, y'all, like I know a lot of them.
I think that's why. Like
we have real ass conversations, and if they could say what they wanted to say without fear of y'all just turning on them, Christian music would be revolutionized. It would be crazy because,
isn't it?
and it would meet so much. The people that are most afraid of hearing that, it would break something in them that would be crazy, because then they would be like, oh, God isn't gonna tank your record because you said fuck. Remember that one worship song where God isn't gonna, he doesn't not like you because of that. It doesn't. I remember when I saw one of the most impactful things that I ever saw in my life was Kurt Franklin's Oprah interview, where he talked about struggling with porn. And he talked about remembering one night where he got so sick of it that he threw everything away. And then at like 3 or 4 in the morning, he got up and went back to the trash can and dug everything out of the trash can.
Wow.
And he's like, that's when I knew I was at my low. When I'm at 3 a.m., Kurt Franklin in a trash can digging out my magazines and my whatever. And I did not think one single negative thing about Kirk. You know, the only thing that I thought was, I've done shows with Kirk multiple times. Like we've been on festivals and different things. And I met him multiple times. And the only thing I thought was, wow, God, this guy was that stricken with this thing that had a hold of him, and you still blessed him.
Yeah.
And that spoke more to me than anything in this world. And if he didn't say and come clean and got dirty and said, this is what I deal with, and just put his dirt out there, bruh, that has kept me to this day, because I'm like, look, the dude was the biggest at one point.
Yeah.
There was no one bigger, because he was as big in the mainstream when God's Property came out. That was mainstream.
That was MTV.
As much as it was anything. So he did it. He crossed over on a fully gospel song. And the whole time he was that like taken by it. So it let me know that the God that I was preaching, way different than the God that was actually existing in this space and still blessing the least of us, who all we have to give, all Kirk had to give was his life. And he made it available to God, and God used it, even though he had some imperfections. So it fully set me free. Like, oh, my struggles aren't a turn off to God. My struggles are why God came.
Yeah.
Why are we ashamed for the reason that literally made him get off of the throne to come down and save us?
I think, no, listen, I get it. I totally
That's
agree with
bonkers
you. Like, I
to me.
totally agree with you. I feel like there's like two, not that there's a genre, gosh, but like, I'm still thinking back on your like masturbation song. And I'm just like, I can't see that in like a corporate church setting in a lot of ways, like a song about that.
Guarantee you, if somebody did it from the altar, it would set people free.
There is a church.
It'll
is a church.
set people
for sure.
free.
I'm not saying it won't set people free. I think it will. Like, I think that song is needed. I think that people are starting to try, and they're saying things like crap in songs now. And I love that for them. But like,
watch out.
Like, watch out. You guys, you know what I mean? Baby steps. But like, I think that there are different types of worship. And the reason I know is because
there's
like,
different types of
scripture.
genres.
No.
Right?
There's different types. Like, worship is worship, and it all comes under the banner of worship. But I think what we've decided is it is a genre of music that you sing on a Sunday, and then you listen on Spotify or whatever you listen to this podcast on.
That's the false
That's what
definition.
is false, yes. But like, Jesus called, when people were like giving like all they had monetarily, worship. He called David dancing naked worship. He said like, don't judge them for that. He called the repentance, putting oil, like, and coming and anointing Jesus with like her tears and her oil and her testimony, worship. And so I think there are different forms and there are different like methods that it can take. I just think that we have like, just like we do freaking humans, like we've just lived small and decided it's such a small thing.
It's one dimensional, and it's so sad.
Like, and I think that honesty portion is truly like our heart leaps, I think, or like we get the Holy Spirit goosebumps when we hear someone say something that we didn't think you were allowed to say on a radio or whatever, whether it's like Cody Carnes is like talking about like what we've made church, or like that the Jesus I know, Benjamin Hastings, of like, hey, would you even like this if you came and saw this? Like
that line where he says, would he like my merch?
Would he like my merch? Is the Jesus I see. And then he's the one in this song that says basically, because in a sense I profit off the cross. And I was like, no one's saying that. Thank you for saying that. Like, that is a tension and that is confusing. And so there are these, like, I think that we need to just move towards saying the things that we just know because of the human experience, that even if I don't deal with the sin that you deal with, we don't have to have the same experience to be able to relate to each other's like emotions and what that brings out in us and the shame. I think people are trying, some don't care, some want the check, but like some are trying to move towards that honesty thematically where we can all relate to, but I think there still is that avenue for the specifics. But I think that's the thing that then connects us with God, to know like the way this relates to you, God sees you, he knows you. I think that's why I connect with like the John Bellion, like, I don't know song. What is it? Like the
Maybe I don't know.
Love that.
I hope I live to the age where I get to see this whole
John Bellion.
underground movement of Christians that do music, that don't put it under the Christian genre, but that
just come out with it.
It just rocks,
'cause that's
people's worlds, and it's like real, like a Bellion. Like I believe Bellion is so anointed. He's so anointed.
Oh my gosh.
There's never been a time where I listen to this guy's record and don't feel like this dude knows God.
Yeah.
Or God, at least God is using him in my life, and he says everything just so real that I'm like, thank you, bro. Thank you.
Because to me, that's like, those are the prophetic voices.
Whoa.
like you look at the prophets of the Bible, they were always outside of the religious establishment.
Mm-hmm.
These are always the men and women who God chose to be the mouthpiece to call people back to the bigger reality. Music-wise, we see that too. Like, we see that in the hip-hop artists. We see that in this new underground indie band that's coming up and writing these raw and honest songs. Like, those are the mouthpieces that God is using right now. And it's not even to say that God isn't using the, you know, who we know are very Christian. He still uses all of it.
For sure.
Like, because he loves us so much. And I am of the belief that God will travel down every single road to find you where you are at. Whether you're running away from him, whether you are running to him, he's on that road and he's with you. And so, but to me, it's like, if you can listen close enough, like, God is constantly using the voices outside of what you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, don't make it a one-dimensional thing. There is so much God everywhere that if you just open your ears, like, you'll hear it. And it may come from the most unexpected mouthpiece that you have ever encountered. But it can and will come if your heart and ears are open. You want to say something?
Yes, I do. Well, first of all, on that, I think Jesus was always looking to see if people would listen to someone they would deem less spiritual. So I think he was always like sending women or like men that had leprosy or like to, hey, go and tell. It was very, very rare. There were some moments where he was like, don't tell anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But the first preacher he sent was a woman that had been divorced a bunch. Anyway, that's fine. But I think the thing that I wanted to say was like, the other part of this is that worship should come from our heart. And so kind of I don't know if you said this on the podcast or if this was maybe our pre-conversation, but like people that have such an issue, right, with the worship songs in church, my question is like, how's your worship in your week?
Yeah.
Like, do you come and you have to know the songs because you have to know that you're saying the right Christian words for the season, if you will? Or are you so full with gratitude with what God's done in your life and where he's at? And are you so communicative with him that you're talking to him about the crap moments and you're cussing to him if you cuss every other day except for on a Sunday in church? Like, God knows that. Turns out, like, hey, excuse me, just so you know, God knows.
Yeah.
Like, and are you being yourself with him? Because the only way, the reason God showed himself to Moses as a man talks to his friend, like in face to face, was because you always find Moses going to God scared and being like, what the hell do I do with these people now? They suck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's worship because he was being honest. And the way we find intimacy with God is to be vulnerable in the same way we build friendships and connections that matter. We've got to be vulnerable. And I think sometimes we look to a brand or a genre of music to tell us what worship is when God has put it inside you this whole entire time. And it is meant to sound different because if he wanted us to all speak the same language, he wouldn't have like scattered the Tower of Babel people to the ends of the earth. Like, there's a story, that's that story for a reason. He doesn't want us to be like in our own little us four and no more circle of kumbaya and that's it. Like, we're meant to give different expressions of God and different expressions of worship. And so if you need one artist to be continually pouring out what you think worship music is and it can't look different,
then your worship is shallow.
And it's misinformed because maybe that's why it shuts off during the week.
Yeah.
Because there's no band playing when you're at work.
Yeah.
Not knowing that just by giving a good attitude at work or treating people kindly at work is worship unto God, because you're making a conscious choice.
Say that.
I am going to show them the love of God by kindness, by love, and that my life now is being worship. I am literally in worship right now.
Yeah.
And if they understood that that's what real worship was, as opposed to what we've said it is, they would be worshiping all the time. It's like it's like prayer.
Yeah.
It's like we've taken certain verses where it's like, get into your quiet place, get into your prayer closet, get into your whatever, and people think a life of prayer is, you know, how much time can you set aside in your day and go pray? When really is, can your entire life become one of prayer?
Yeah.
Whereas you just are in this continual dialogue, continual by what you see, by what you whatever. Like, that's a different thing.
Yes.
That's a different life.
Brandon's gonna take a lap.
Man, that's okay. So I read this book, I remember in college, and it revolutionized my life. And if you got time to read it great. If not,
What's it
I
called?
will. It's called The Practice of the Presence of God. It's by this brother Lawrence, right?
Yeah, I read it.
And he talks about this story, and he talks about how there's this moment, this realization he had that as he was mopping the floor of this kitchen, that it was just as spiritual as him leading others into a Bible study or devotion. And it changed my life because I began to realize that anything where my heart's posture is I'm trying to honor God, it becomes an act of worship.
Yep.
So this was the very thing of why basketball to me was such a spiritual thing, because I'm playing unto God. This is now an act of worship. This isn't me shooting a round thing into another round thing. This is now becoming my body saying, thank you, God, for loving me. So it's all worship because it's all the posture of heart. And I remember I heard this one guy, he leads this it's pretty known. It's called International House of Prayer in Kansas City, IHOP. Mike Bickle. And he talked about this. He said, whether I am taking a nap or raising the dead, it is all the same because of my heart.
I love that.
Think about the most spiritual Christian thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And compare that with taking a nap. If your heart's posture is you're trying to honor and love God, it's worship.
Yeah.
And it's the same reward in the end.
If we can get that, man, if we can just get that, the purpose that you'll feel in your life, because some of us feel like we're not doing enough for God because it's not outwardly seen. Like we're not talking about him enough. We're not enough. We're not doing it enough because what we've been taught is this is how you live a life for God. And very few people think that just their existence is bringing honor to God because you are, if you can position your heart in this way, every breath is like a thank you.
Whoa.
Like, thank you. I'm breathing. How many people didn't wake up to, like, if you can really position yourself into that, where you're like, every breath is a connectivity to this spirit. Man, like, it's really hard for you to think that God is far from you. The only time you think those things is when you've put false definitions on what it means to be Christian and what it means to worship and what it means to be connected. Those false definitions then put you in a depraved state, but it's not even real. If you believe that the Spirit of God is in you, then how can you not exhale worship?
Dang.
If you position your heart, it has to be a conscious positioning of your heart. And no more shown, not to the invisible God, because they even say this. How can you say you love a God that you have not seen when you can't love your brother?
Whoa.
Which you do see? Like, that's bullshit. That's why I laugh at people that come at me online. I'm like, how can you say you love Jesus when you ain't even loving me? Get the hell out of here. You love a version of Jesus that you think is real, but you don't love Jesus, because the Jesus that you claim to love loves the hell out of me. So what are you doing coming at me?
I think it's like comes down to as well fear. Like, I think we're all afraid we're not doing enough. We're all afraid that God's not proud of us. And so how that outworks is the way we treat others. If you don't feel like you're enough, you're going to be a keyboard warrior for sure. Like, if you don't think that God's proud of you, you're absolutely going to be tearing down the other people, trying to just be honest about their life. And I think that, like, for all of the people that I find, which is not as much as other people for sure, but that come at me for different things online, that don't know me, that see one post and think that's my entire life, or think that because I post thoughts about God or about the Bible that I then have put myself up here as some guru in the faith, which I've never tried to do. I think really, doesn't it all come out of just a fear of something that is not even biblical, like not even the God that we know, the God that created us, which is that God loves us, like, period?
I don't know. I think people are afraid of not having space in heaven.
Well,
I feel like they act like
yes and no.
like as
I
if
think
there's
that
a limited
really,
amount of space.
I think if we all came down to it, I honestly think that people project how they really feel on the inside. And so the people
for sure.
that need that type of worship is because they need to know they're right with God, which tells us they don't think they are actually right with God in the hidden places, which is why I think it's so beautiful to have songs, honestly, talking about people's like mess ups in the same verse that they can talk about like the fact that God got them here anyway. I'm again quoting John Bellion, like in a roundabout way. But like, I think that it would just do us all a dose of good to say we're all afraid and we're all trying our best and we're all messy and God is still good and he still loves you. And like, just give each other a break. Be nice. Just be kind. That's worship.
100%. I think the world would be better. Will it ever happen? No, because I don't think.
Maybe.
No, I don't think it'll ever happen because the propensity to.
I need to believe.
Until our culture changes, like what B was talking about. I don't know if it's this podcast or last podcast. Until you're outside of a culture that judges things on wins and losses, success and failures, money and not money. God will always be put into a societal structure.
Yeah.
And you'll always be judged by that structure. Like that's society's yays and nays. Because I promise you, the second you step out of this society and go into a culture that doesn't have what we have, the view of God's going to be completely different. It's not going to, there will be grace available because, and that's why a lot of pastors and preachers who travel around the world say they never feel God more than in these places that have nothing.
Yeah.
They don't have time to argue over, you know what I'm saying? Like what you're saying on social media. They don't have phones.
Fam.
How many people get depressed off of this stuff? They don't have phones, so they can't judge your message because they don't have speakers to hear your message.
They don't know what shoes you're wearing when you're preaching.
They can't drive to your church. They can't do anything. So I guarantee you,
they don't have a keyboard.
God looks different over there. And I know I've been there.
Yeah.
I've gone to South Africa. I've gone to different mission trips
cultures,
where it's like
different cultures, different worship. The things that we in America would like pray out of someone is actually the way people worship in like a different place.
It's like, that simplicity. There's a lot less noise. Like all the voices that we hear on a constant daily basis. Like there's far less noise. And I guess when there's far less noise, it's easier to listen to the voice that's the one that's always been speaking.
Dang. There's like some of the most poignant moments of worship have been in complete silence, uncomfortable silence.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe if you can't worship God in complete silence, like maybe just don't open Spotify for a second. Maybe sit.
Jason Upton has this song, it's called In the Silence. And it's always been one of my favorite worship songs. And he goes, in the silence, you are speaking. And I always think about that. And I'm like, man, I do everything I can to stay busy, to keep my time occupied, because I know the truth is actually in the silence. So sometimes, man, it might not even be music that you need to connect to God with. Sometimes then you sit your ass on the couch and be quiet and listen.
Yeah. I hope you got something from this. And
I got something out of this.
Yeah.
We worshipped, so I don't know if y'all did, but we did.
I hope the one thing that you didn't get was that we hate worship music. We don't. We don't hate worship music. We just wish to never use that term again.
I think that most Christian artists in the worship industry hate the genre of worship music.
Yeah, no. They're definitely trust me when I say...
Call them out. Say their names.
No, trust me when I say they long to be free, to just say what they want. They just long to be free. If there was a space for them to be safe, you would never believe the kind of songs these people would write.
Yeah, but also like Brandon was talking about prophets, and like didn't prophets like have to go first? I mean, some of them. Come on.
Sure, but no, it's different when you live and die by this.
Yeah,
it's different.
What do you mean?
Because they can't feed their families.
Oh, okay.
They lose money. You're in the Christian industry. If you're not Christian enough, you will lose your money.
Wow.
That's why the number one rule I always tell people now it used to be, practice so that you can be good. Just practice. Don't count on the Holy Spirit to make you better. Practice. That's how you're going to get better. That was my number one advice. Now, find a way to make money outside of music, outside of ministry. Whatever you do, find a way to make money outside of God so that what you do for God.
That's a whole different topic.
Yeah, you never have to bend the knee. Never.
Jesus was a carpenter. Paul made tents. People's job was not what they got paid for.
Exactly. That it's almost like what they got paid for in the kingdom, and they just reinvested it. If you can get rich outside of it, then why would you would never have to bend a knee. Every single person in your church could disagree with what God's speaking into your heart, and they can all leave, and you'll be like, well, I said what you wanted me to say, Jesus.
You'd feel free. The
Let me
weight's
go
lifted
back.
off.
Let me go back to my house, and when people show up, I'll come back.
By the way, this is the new model of church. It's not based on a tithing system. This is a new model.
I agree. So hit us up. What y'all think about it? Even if you hated this. I doubt you did. But if
Manny
you,
wants you to hit him up the most.
I'll have you on the podcast.
I don't. I'm terrified of what people think, so please don't hit me up.
I will
But
have
Be kind
any
to me.
I don't care. I'm happy.
any hater. I'll
Brandon's a happy middle.
gladly put on the podcast, and we'll have this conversation. But we love you guys. We pray that you really do see your life as one that can be worship in every sense of the word, and even in the most mundane or what you claim as unimportant work, that too can be something that's like insanely a worship experience that you can have with the Creator. I just hope I hope that settles on you more than anything else. So we love you.
we
Thank
hope
you
that
so
you
much.
find your seat at the table. I was just thinking you were going to keep going. But if you don't, just so you know, everybody, Elise will always add more words to the final than Manny does. You are always welcome at ours.
Love you guys. Cheers.
Cheers.